Well, next to the latest on the search for the submersible that vanished while taking 5 people to the wreck of the Titanic, Canadian military surveillance aircraft have detected underwater noises as a massive search continues in a remote part of the North Atlantic. A statement from the US Coast Guard didn't elaborate on what rescuers believed the noises might be, but American media outlets citing internal government memos are describing them as banging sounds. Well, for more, we're joined now in studio by our science editor here at France 24, Julia Seeger. Julia, great to have you in studio. Firstly, talk to us about how these knocking sounds may have been detected.
Well, U.S. and Canadian Coast Guards deployed P-3 and P-8 aircrafts, which have underwater detection capabilities, and they were indeed able to hear these knocking or banging sounds indeed. And then they decided to then deploy remotely operated vehicles, ROVs, to try to understand the sources of this sound, but it hasn't yielded any results yet. However, it is good news, so to speak, because this is a very sensitive situation indeed. But the sound were heard at 30-minute intervals, which actually tends to point to a human source, this regularity. Now, sound is their greatest ally right now because sound underwater actually travels very fast and it travels far. That said, we need to be cautious because there is a lot of sound in the oceans, and more it's actually identified as a huge problem. It's called marine noise pollution, with all of the echoes of what's happening on the surface, with all of the marine transport and all of the noises that you have inside the ocean. It's very difficult today to distinguish sounds, but it is a valuable hint to try to narrow down the search zone. We have now this signal. We also have the starting point. We know that they left from St. John's, and then we know that they lost connection an hour and 45 minutes into the dive, but that doesn't tell us much because there are a lot of currents and they could have drifted by now.
And tell us why exactly it's proving so difficult to find them.
Well, firstly, because at that depth, it's pitch dark. It's very cold. The pressure is 380 times greater than the atmospheric pressure that we live on Earth, or at least on the surface of the Earth. It's very cold indeed, and it's often said that scientists actually know more about what's happening on the surface of Mars than they do about the deep sea. And so hence that leads to another problem, which is that we don't really have the equipment, unmanned, agile submarines that are capable of going that deep. I know it sounds incredible, but it's the truth. And the Titan was actually a feat in that sense. Now, this is also why you're seeing almost an international coalition getting together. The French, who have decided to divert one of their research vessels called the Atalante, which is equipped with a deep-sea submarine. Another problem is the extent of the search zone, because it's the equivalent of the state of Connecticut, and in depth, it's the equivalent of twice the size of the Grand Canyon. There's also unfavorable weather conditions with poor visibility. Now, many rescuers are still on the surface of the ocean checking if the submarine has resurfaced. Others are scanning the seafloor, and they're doing it with what we call sonar buoys. The way it works is that you're going to emit ultrasounds like this, and whenever it's going to hit an object, let it be a fish or a submarine, it's going to bounce back up and be reflected. And because we know the speed of ultrasounds, we're able to determine the distance, but we're also able to give a little bit more information about the consistency of the object, because the harder the object, the stronger the returning pulse will be. So that's how you can make the difference between fish and a submarine, for instance.
Wasn't the Titan itself equipped with a sonar?
Yes, it was indeed. It had a transponder and a transreceiver. It's a device that can both emit and receive communication, and that usually allows for what we call underwater acoustic positioning. But we know that the Titan lost connection completely, and we think that there was a power outage. The Titan is a battery-powered vessel, so they could have had also an emergency backup power source, but it's unclear whether they did have that device. Of course, the company Ocean Gate is providing limited information because of how sensitive the mission is. Now, we can use technology, but we can also use humans, because this is what analysts in acoustic warfare do. They have such a fine ear that they can listen in to what's happening in the ocean and detect whether a submarine is in distress.
Now, even if it is found, Julia, bringing it back to the surface is going to be another difficult task, isn't it?
That's right. We don't even know how we'll do it if we identify the location of the submarine. It will all depend on the situation on site, whether of the condition of the submarine, if it's entangled in something. There's also questions about whether the window at the front of the submarine will be able to sustain the pressure, to withstand the pressure. So you also have to respect, the decompression stop drops. So you can't just attach it to a cable and bring it back up. So it's going to be really complicated. I think that scientists right now are trying to find different solutions, are already thinking about it. It is a unique situation. And in any case, there's also a lot of heated debate already about these type of private expeditions that use the money of billionaires to try to finance research. And it's presented as a tourist expedition, but indeed the idea behind it is more to try to finance research. And something needs to be said about the fact that states don't really have the money now to pour into the exploration of the deep sea as well. And all the underwater research that we have right now, it's usually conducted by unmanned robotic vehicles.
Okay, thank you so much for that update.